Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Hey, did you hear? Not going to be a government shutdown before Thanksgiving. Hey, actually got something. I'm literally shocked. Was not expecting it, but a bipartisan deal to extend the funding of our government. Who knew? Who knew they could do it? It was a 336 to 95 vote, and it was Republicans that voted against it. There were more Democrats that voted for it than Republicans, but the Republican leadership, this now going to be interesting. How soon is there a countdown for Mike Johnson's head? When will Matt Gaetz have him ousted? Gonna be interesting to see how this plays out, and that has been the news for a good portion of the day, and it's good stuff. Not gonna tap that down. Happy to see that something functional happened. So thrilled. But over the weekend, we spent a couple of days in Buffalo, New York. I've been a Broncos fan my whole life. So the Broncos played the Bills on Monday Night Football. So me and the kids went up to Buffalo. We shuffled off to Buffalo to see the Broncos play on Monday night. And while we were there, had some great opportunities to see Niagara Falls, which you have to do. But also we went to the site where Teddy Roosevelt was inaugurated after McKinley was killed in Buffalo. And they have a really nice historical, society funded, it's the National Park Service that funds it. But the house where TR was inaugurated, and the tour was fantastic, and the information was incredible. And I'm probably going to be talking about some of the stuff that came out of this, for the next couple of weeks, because it was wow. It was one of those moments where the more things change, the more they're exactly the same, whether it was 1901 when Roosevelt was inaugurated, or 2023, the exact same thing. And it's that pitting of the wealth class versus everyone else. One of the questions on one of the displays they had a little interactive displays where you could turn the knob and decide which answer. They asked, if your factory, your cotton mill, were built on a river and a rolling hills, and how would you treat your child labor? Would you give them a window so they could see how beautiful it is outside? Would you give them a picnic if they worked safe for a month? Would you give them an hour of leisure time to go out and play? Those were your options. And every one of the questions that they gave and every one of the answers they gave, none acceptable. But it showed the world that TR was in, and a lot of it is right now, which is why I keep saying we need this generation of Teddy Roosevelt, the trust buster. But we can't do any of that because we've got a news structure that is so badly broken. And, I say all the time that Republicans hate working people. Just look at what they do. And that was on full display today. Because you may remember last week I said, hey, Bernie Sanders, the chairman of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, the HELP Committee, they were going to have a hearing today. And that hearing was titled Standing Up Against Corporate Greed, How Unions Are Improving the Lives of Working Families. And they had three very distinguished labor leaders there. You had Sean Fain from the UAW. You had our friend Sarah Nelson from the Flight Attendants Union. And you had Sean O'Brien from the Teamsters there, all to testify on what? Standing up against corporate greed, because each of them are doing that. Look at what the Teamsters did with UPS and winning a historic contract. You look at what Sean Fain did with the UAW and with the Big Three, historic contract. You look at what Sarah Nelson's doing and organizing the Delta employees and making the flight attendants respectable. I mean, you're in this world where these are folks who've come to talk about how are we going to make workers' lives better? How are we going to fight for better wages, hours, conditions? How are we going to ensure there's opportunity for working people? And what happened? Mark Wayne Mullen, the senator from Oklahoma, he's had an ongoing tiff with Sean O'Brien. There was the whole dust up, let's have a cage match and let's fight each other, and all that stuff. And today that was one of the questions. You stand up and let's fight it out right here. Mark Wayne and tough guy, and O'Brien's like, no, we're here to talk about working people, and that's what our news media focused on. None of the other stuff. Fox News, congressional fisticuffs, UFC in committee. CNN, Bernie Sanders intervenes and stops GOP senator from fighting a witness. Reuters, U.S. Senator challenges Teamsters president to fight during hearing. NBC News, stand your butt up. Fist fight nearly breaks out during Senate hearing with until Bernie Sanders steps in. And look, we can go down the rest of them. They're all about the same. It's all we heard. It's all you heard. That's it. There was nothing else being reported about what came out of that hearing. Nothing. So you didn't get to hear what Sean O'Brien's testimony was. You didn't get to hear O'Brien talking about the need to stand with workers when they're fighting for better wages, hours, conditions against corporate greed. You didn't hear him talking about my idea of an adopt a striker program. He said, look, literally get out there and stand with people on the picket line. My adopt a striker plan. And exploitive fishing of businesses. Stop these third-party logistics companies from operating as other companies doing the business of their company for the sole purpose of shielding themselves from liabilities. Amazon being a big part of this, FedEx being a big part of this. You can go down the list. All these temp agencies, all of these gimmicks. How about we talk about that? No. Did we talk about that today in the news? No. Did we talk about the misclassification of millions of workers in this country and calling them independent contractors when they're really people who do the work of the companies? No, we didn't do that. Did we talk at all about the obscene corporate profits and the obscene CEO pay? He's saying, look, we got to rein in executive compensation. And we got to do it in the tax code, what I've been saying for a long time. And he pointed out from 1978 to 2022, CEO compensation went up 1,200%. Why the average working person? 15%. You wonder why you're struggling? You wonder why it's hard to make ends meet? I think it's pretty simple. You got two guys in a room. One of them is the CEO. Who took all the cookies? Who's got all the money? The CEO. In 2022, CEOs were paid 344 times that of the typical worker. Now you contrast that to 1965 when it was 21 times. We have had a massive redistribution of wealth in this country from the people who work for a living, the people who go to work, punch the clock, bust their butt, to people who sit in the corner offices and point fingers. And did we hear any of this in the corporate-controlled mainstream media? Did we hear any of this? No, what we got was bread and circus. We got, there was going to be fisticuffs. Did we hear about the tax code that literally encourages the kind of inequality that we're living through by giving all these loopholes and all of these special tax breaks for rich people so that they can pay CEOs insane amounts of money? And then, of course, you write it right off. No, we didn't talk about that. Did we talk about the fact that we're subsidizing these corporations with billions of our dollars? Did we talk about any of that? No. It was Bernie Sanders who had to break up a fight in the Senate. Did we talk about the fact that we've got to address how corporate America uses bankruptcy laws to screw working people out of their pensions? And I've talked about this before. The reason the right wing is so mad at the Obama years and what happened with the auto industry is all those workers should have lost their pensions. They should have lost their accrued pensions. They should have nothing. And yet we see this going on time and time again, over and over again. And did we hear about that in our corporate-controlled mainstream media? No, but that's what O'Brien talked about in his testimony. And it's in his testimony. You can read it. We'll get links out on social media because it is well worth the read to understand what the real issues are and what the real demands of working people should be. We should be denying federal contracts to union-busting companies. That's a no-brainer. That should be a no-brainer. If you treat people poorly, you cheat people out of wages, you should not get federal contracts. You shouldn't get our money. If you're a wage thief, you should not get our tax jobs. That's simple. They talked about passing the PRO Act, make it easier for workers to organize, to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, fund the NLRB and OSHA so workers have the right to organize and be protected. Wow, who would have thought of such a thing? And then the part that got me in his testimony, because it played with my weekend in Buffalo, modernize antitrust laws. Stop allowing the concentration of corporate power into the hands of few that harm workers' ability to fight for better wages, hours, conditions. Stop these abusive business models that are set up solely to screw working people and maximize profits. And I know, but Rick, that's what corporations do. Yeah, which is why you need guardrails. And I go back to the Teddy Roosevelt era, who was all in favor of regulating things that needed to be regulated. He was a hands-off guy for the most part, but understood the razor of capitalism is really sharp. You do need to dull some of that so it doesn't roll over working people. And this idea that of the square deal, which they made, quite front and center for everybody, not just for the CEOs, not just for the very wealthy, but everyone. Did we hear any of that today? No. What did we get? We got a clown show. We got a clown show from Senator Mark Wayne Mullen from Oklahoma, and we got bread and circus from our corporate-controlled media. And if you don't think Mark Wayne Mullen's stunt was done specifically to change the narrative to ensure that we never talk about what's really important, then maybe we deserve what we're getting. Maybe we deserve the Congress that we have. And maybe we deserve to continue to get cheated. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back after this.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
The idea that politicians talk about a square deal, that you get what you need, that there's opportunity for everyone. I got to tell you, in going through that display that they had in Buffalo, and if you're in Buffalo, literally just blocks from where the shooting happened on Jefferson Street at the supermarket there. I mean, because we ended up going there and it was surreal. But if you have a chance to get there, well worth the opportunity to check that out. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Steve on line one. Steve, how are you?
Yeah, fairly well, and I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the two big stories are, Kevin McCarthy in the House and obviously what happened in the Senate. The Senate is supposed to be the higher house, the house that's full of adults. And this idea that, that not only that he decided to bait someone else into this. I mean, I guess you could give somebody a little bit of leeway if they tried to bait you. But he came in there looking for basically some sort of ridiculous Aaron Burr nonsense kind of fight. The kind of thing that 200 years ago some idiot might do. But, I mean, for this to happen, and then as you point out, for it to be, the story, the big story of the day, these two confrontations, one between a labor leader and a senator from Oklahoma, and the other one between two Republicans who apparently despise one another. There was another story. We actually passed, in the House a budget, and we have averted a shutdown. So yeah, that maybe should take precedence over what's going on. But as you pointed out, it's about who delivers the news and who decides what's important. And let's face it, for a lot of people, the whole dry notion of the budget, okay, yeah, well, we passed it, that's fine, but really don't need to cover it as a story. But if you can give me a video of a senator wanting to step outside with somebody, testifying in front of their committee, oh yeah, let me tune into that. But we rely on media outlets to make sort of responsible decisions on our part, and because the airwaves, we gave them to these people. ABC, NBC, CBS. Yes, now everything is streamed, and now everything is cable television and so forth. But these companies were built on the backs of the American taxpayer. They, long before any of these other entities existed, the vast majority of Americans got their news from public airways, whether it was radio or television. And we gave those to them, and they were supposed to behave in a somewhat responsible manner. But not surprisingly, when you had sort of, media conglomerates form, and you had mergers and so forth, all of a sudden, surprise, surprise, Disney, that also runs things like theme parks and theaters and so forth, they're not terribly interested in necessarily talking about the inequities of labor in this country and wealth and so forth, because they don't just own ABC. So if David Muir isn't covering something with regard to the labor scene, yeah, there's a reason why. I wrote a piece way back in the mid-'90s about why nobody was covering the 1996 Telecommunications Act. Well, guess what? Why would anybody cover that?
Yep.
What possible benefit would it be to you as a producer or anybody else to go to your boss and say, hey, this is an important piece of public policy legislation, that impacts our industry. We should probably cover it with regard to all of the questionable outcomes. No, nobody wanted to do that. Why? Because it's their industry. There's nothing to be gained there. Nobody's going to say, oh, wow, you did that great piece on our industry. Let's go ahead and give you a job or a promotion. So, yeah, you've got to go outside of the bubble. You've got to look into things more, so you've got to be intellectually curious. Otherwise, you're just not going to hear about what happens. And like I said, we didn't get here magically. Every time there has been a movement in terms of workers and average people and just fairness. I mean, no one said that, the average Joe on the assembly line is supposed to make what the CEO makes. But as you pointed out, there was a time when you could see the CEO of your company, the president of your company, at the church where you went. Because, yeah, they lived, a mile away in the nicer neighborhood, but you still lived in the same neighborhood. They didn't live, on the Upper East Side of Manhattan or Bel Air or Newport Beach and so forth in a $50 million home. You're not even in the same state as they are. So we are completely removed from one another, and there's, again, this idea has always been there in this country that the elite are somehow better than the rest of us, that if you make more, that it means that you're deserving of more, and that, that everybody else is just sort of an impediment. And we reached the point, quite frankly, in this country where the super rich have run out of things to spend money on. They're only interested in competing with each other to see who can make more and be in that exclusive billionaire or super millionaire club, and what they can buy and what they can own and all of this sort of thing, without once considering, is this healthy for my country? Is it healthy for our democracy? No, apparently we don't care.
Yeah.
I hate the idea that the Washington Post, an iconic newspaper in this country, has got to rely on, the decisions that Jeff Bezos is going to make with regard to what goes in or not into that paper.
Yeah.
And I mean, with all due respect, okay, fine. He made a lot of money. He capitalized on the idea that, you can get things to people very quickly. Great.
Yeah.
Except
Also,
that,
hold on. I got to add one thing there. Also, capitalize the great crime. Cheating states out of tax dollars.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Because he said, hey, you know what? We can just bring people everything. We don't have to have a store, physical presence. We don't have to pay local taxes. Yeah, we can deliver things for a lot cheaper. Yeah, go figure. Yeah, you can do that. But the man has no training. In the same way, I don't know why we think Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or any of these other people, they're bright guys in their own right in terms of what they built. I hold a doctoral degree in political science. No one should consider taking my advice in terms of running a corporation or give me a scalpel and say, go to work, Steve, this guy's got brain cancer. One thing does not translate to the other.
Yeah.
So I don't know why we continue to make these people out to be some sort of gods as if they're, have some sort of insight. So when Elon Musk tweets out something about public policy in this country, why should you pay attention to him? You should pay attention to him about as much as you should to Kim Kardashian. I mean, being wealthy does not make you intelligent or well-educated.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and I've been talking about the Teddy Roosevelt place we went to. One of the displays they had was, his meeting with Andrew Carnegie. Where Carnegie was, evidently supposedly said that, money in the hands of the average person is wasted. You should give it to someone like him because, much better things could be built. You have, Morgan, and you have, Rockefeller, and you have the robber barons of the era, Jay Goulds, and those folks who built big things because they hoarded all the money and didn't pay workers very much. I see that being kind of where we are today, where we seem to be. The more things change, the more they're exactly the same.
Right, and what they do is they create a mythology about how this country was built. And you can look along the landscape of the large eastern cities, and you can include Chicago in there and other places that were built by people in the late 19th, early 20th century, people who went out and worked for next to nothing. Here it was the center of the meatpacking business. And, yeah, it built a lot of Chicago, created a lot of wealth. But you know what? At what cost? For generations of people who worked from dawn to dusk, who worked 6 days a week, who had no retirement, who lived in a shack, had no health care. And we just literally used up those human beings for generations. And, yes, out of that did come an impressive city. And people gave a lot of money to public works and things, that we now recognize today as great things in Chicago and New York and other cities. But we ate up people's lives doing it. And the question I have is, what is the end goal here? My vision was always that society should progress to a point where everyone should be able to enjoy a better standard of living with each subsequent generation. But according to these people, no, society can advance technologically and otherwise, but the distribution of wealth, that doesn't matter. If you're working 60 or 70 hours a week, just like they were a century ago, how in heaven's name is society advanced? You pretty much work your entire life away.
Yep.
Hope to have enough money to retire with some basic standard of living, and then you die. I mean, what life was that? But hey, they can go ahead and shoot themselves into space. So that's important.
There you go, Steve. I appreciate the thoughts, man. As always, good stuff.
Thank you. Take care.
No, and it's important that he brings this up because, I was just, as he was talking, I was thinking about one of the questions on the interactive display at the inaugural site there in Buffalo. And one of the question number one was, you own a factory and a company town where workers rent their homes. A sudden economic downturn threatens business. How can you weather the economic storm? A, provide free health care for workers until times improve. B, offer a bonus to workers with factory cutting cost ideas. Or C, reduce wages to cut costs, but maintain rental rates. And we all know that C was the answer of the time. And I would argue none of these are sufficient ideas, but we know C was the idea of the time. You go to Chicago, the Pullman strike was because you had an economic downturn. And Pullman said, no, you're going to keep paying me full rent, even though we're cutting your wages, cutting your hours, cutting you. But my life has to maintain a certain level of security and wealth. Yeah, the more things change, folks. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1978. That was the day OSHA published its lead standard. The standard reduced the permissible exposure by 75% to protect nearly 1 million workers from damage to nervous, urinary, and reproductive systems. As early as 1908, Alice Hamilton, the mother of occupational medicine, noted that lead had endangered workers as far back as the first half century after Christ. In their book, Deceit and Denial, denial the deadly politics of industrial pollution, historians Gerald Markowitz and David Rosner add that throughout her distinguished career, Hamilton was deeply involved in uncovering the relationship between lead and disease in the American workforce. Hamilton's groundbreaking research on the effects of lead paved the way for a growing uproar against its continued use. After the Occupational Safety and Health Act passed in 1970, occupational and public health activists pushed hard for a lead standard. A new generation of industrial hygienists emphasized how unsound, industry-driven conclusions regarding safe lead levels impacted women workers and workers of color. Industry had long asserted that women and African Americans were simply more susceptible to lead poison, which served to justify discrimination in hiring. Some unions accepted these terms, if only to demand a stringent lead standard that included immediate implementation of engineering controls. But leading hygienists like Gene Stellman blasted these arguments. Stellman insisted such conclusions reflected racial and gender bias rather than any credible scientific evidence. She added that men, women, and children, regardless of race or ethnicity, were all adversely affected by lead exposure. The final standard adopted was considered a compromise. Discrimination in hiring has continued and enforcement proves difficult. But even a watered-down standard was too much for the lead industry. They have been fighting it ever since.
The far-out right wing's latest political ploy takes extremism to the extreme, escalating their divisive series of culture wars, banning books, suppressing women's rights, whitewashing history, demonizing teachers, etc. Their current idea is to declare war on ideas. Specifically, they're going after state university programs that teach creative arts and social studies, including history, languages, music, civics, literature, economics, theology, and other courses in the humanities that explore ideas, foster free thinking, and expand enlightenment. They say we can't have that. Thus, GOP lawmakers in North Carolina, for example, are eliminating funding for top humanities professors in their universities, shifting those funds to programs in high-tech and engineering that are favored by the corporate hierarchy. Likewise, public universities in Alaska, Florida, Iowa, Kansas, Ohio, and elsewhere are being made to cancel their humanities programs and puff up their departments of business, finance, and marketing. The right-wing shriveled view is that a university education is not about expanding one's horizon and enriching America's democratic society, but solely about training students to fit into a corporate workforce. As a Mississippi Republican official explained, under this minimalized and monetized concept of higher education, state spending on college degree programs will require that they match the needs of the economy. What? Is America nothing but its economy? Is the value of students measured only by the size of their future paychecks? Is public spending only worthy if it serves corporate interests? This is Jim Hightower saying, ironically, the politicos trying to cancel teaching of the humanities are proving that such courses are essential. After all, the humanities strive to humanize today's social order of corporate domination, exploitation, and inequality. The value of that vastly exceeds its price.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So here's one of those things that I'm excited about. This idea that free trade is this is the goal. I mean, I've been talking about for years, reining in neoliberalism, reining in the open border idea for money and for goods, and maybe trading a little smarter. And the New York Times had an interesting piece today on the rise and fall of our trade with China and all of this stuff, and people starting to accept the idea that, I don't know, maybe it's been the bad policy that we've been saying it is. And here to share some thoughts on, well, that and where we go from here, because maybe we've had the grand epiphany, I'm not sure, but where do we go from here? That's why I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, the website, if you want to check out the work that they do. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it was great to be with you.
So let's talk about this because, for the last couple of decades, it's been all about free trade. This belief that countries that trade with each other don't fight each other. And then, hey, rice and beans, the person who produces the most rice and the most beans, everyone's better off. That hasn't worked out very well, has it?
No, no, it hasn't. And it's been interesting. And I'm just going to take a diversion here just for a second, because there was this big piece in the New York Times, and I hope people have a chance to see it, about this evolution of thinking, as you described, on free trade, is written by a guy named Peter Goodman, who I have no doubt is a good reporter, but in my recollection and all my conversations with him over the last 15 or 16 years, completely missed this. Okay. And he wasn't alone. I mean, a bunch of other reporters kind of cheerleaded globalization and kind of were skeptical about the impacts on workers. And so it's nice that now it's kind of mainstream thought that this whole notion of trade as being a win-win for American workers, American consumers, and the same in China has been kind of completely busted, right? And so obviously there's variations of what to do about it and how to go about it. And there's like the Trump bluster, and there's kind of a more measured approach under Biden. There's the let's just trade with our allies instead. There's the let's bring it all home. And so there are a number of different features. And then there's some companies that are still stubbornly clinging to this notion that they can make things in China like nothing's changed
Right.
at all. And Apple comes to mind, although they're hedging their bets a little bit. But there are plenty of companies that are still making big bets on China, and a bunch of their CEOs are going to be meeting with the general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party in just a couple of days in San Francisco to break bread with him.
You know, I've always said you make the things you can, you trade for the things you can't. That's always been my mindset in this. Now, and that goes back to Adam Smith's philosophy, as I understand it as well. Look, everyone can make T-shirts. Everyone can make tennis shoes. Everyone can make cars. There are some things that some places have different advantages, and you trade. You actually trade for those. You just don't buy stuff that you used to make here and is now made somewhere else. That's not trade. That's just buying stuff made somewhere else. So for me, I believe in trade, not what we've kind of begun to call trade. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I don't think either of us are suggesting autarky, that we should just close our borders altogether and, make do with what we have. And there are some benefits, to having like a supply chain that's integrated throughout North America. Because I really do believe that in a country like Mexico, if you raise wages, that they'll buy more American products. I fundamentally believe that. And so it's so there should be trade, but obviously, the rules matter, how the other country behaves matter. And you're right, there is just this excessive offshoring that eviscerated towns. And many of your listeners are listening to stations from those communities, Rick, and they know firsthand the impact not only at the factory, but also what it meant for the downtown, for the housing market, what it meant for the Little League and the bowling alley, what it meant for families and the disintegration of the social fabric. And so, there's no going back to that, and there shouldn't be. And there should continue to be this reckoning about how it got so wrong. And just my last word about this also is that we should not listen to the people who got us into this mess in the first place.
Exactly.
To explain to us why we have to do it another way. Like, Larry Summers, shut up. Don't want to hear it. Any of these people on the right or the left who claim that this is the only path forward and Biden's making a mistake or Trump made a mistake on this, no, they're totally disqualified. They got this completely wrong, and it's definitely time for a new generation of thought on how we approach this with robust industrial policy domestically, and with a worker-centered trade policy that includes tariffs against Chinese products and other safeguards as well, Rick, to make sure that they're not building their economy on the backs of our intellectual property,
Right.
as well as our lost jobs.
No, and that brings us to where I wanted to go next, because, I've had a lot of people email me and go, well, you keep touting how wonderful the UAW did in this contract and got workers, these big raises and, all this health care and all this, talking about a 32-hour work week, all this stuff. It's all going to go away anyway when the Chinese EVs come flooding the market. And I'm going, no, you don't allow that to happen. In fact, I understand there's been a bipartisan group of lawmakers who want our trade representative to jack up the current tariffs to ensure that that doesn't happen, because you can't have a key industry like the auto industry just get decimated by China dumping into this country, which I understand, and maybe you know better than I do, and I assume you do, but they've got, from what I understand, they've got millions of cars that are just sitting. They don't know what to do with.
That's right. They do. The Chinese auto import surge is something we've never had to worry about, really. I mean, because it was always way down the road. We didn't have to think about it. But finally, that day is here where we do have to worry about it, because their EV industry in particular has scaled up, built on the back of government subsidies in China, by the way. And the only thing holding it back from the American market right now is the fact that we do have 25% tariffs in place currently against Chinese automobiles. And that, in many cases, those cars can't yet meet U.S. safety standards because, they're built with cheapness in mind, not necessarily with safety.
Just say they're Chinese made.
Well, look, and so there are some, Polestar is a brand that, imports some EVs from China. There's a few others that come in, but it is a tiny, tiny part of the U.S. market. Now, but BYD, NIO, these might be names that your listeners have never heard before, but they are big global players in EVs, and their vehicles are in a lot of markets right now outside of China, particularly in Europe, which, by the way, it was to take action. But yeah, these lawmakers, it was the Select Committee on China. Mike Gallagher, Republican from Wisconsin, Rajna Krishnamurthy, Democrat from Illinois, Haley Stevens, Democrat from Michigan, I think John Molinar, Republican from Michigan, who said to the USTR, United States Trade Representative, let's keep the 25% tariffs. Let's look at raising them. Let's initiate kind of like basically a proactive trade case before we get this surge of imports coming in. Because as you said, Rick, there's way more automobiles produced in China than they can soak up domestically. And we know what happens. We've seen that happen with steel. We've seen that happen with a bunch of other types of products as well. So, yeah, we have to keep that tariff wall up. We have to keep it high. We have to keep investing in our own domestic industry to make sure that we are dominating that marketplace in North America. Because once you hit the auto sector, you have hit the heart of American manufacturing. I mean, 1 in every 9 manufacturing jobs is in the auto sector and manufacturing, and so much else, as I know you can attest, is related to it. All of these, parts shops and what have you. And so it would be totally devastating to have to compete with massively subsidized vehicles that they can sell at a fraction of the market price here in the United States. And what I don't want is a bunch of environmentalists. And look, I'm totally aligned on the climate change goals, but it shouldn't be, let's bring these Chinese vehicles over and we'll be able to scale up our EV market in a hurry. That's not the right way to do this, and we need to resist that siren song, because it would be a death blow to U.S. manufacturing.
Well, thanks for jumping on my next question, because that's where I was going to go next. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Scott Paul. He's the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. Because, I hear a lot, we should allow them in because, we can get cheap EVs to everyone. We can basically give them out You know, I'm sure you remember the Yugo from the 90s, where they were literally selling them buy one, get one free. Buy one so you could have one for parts. They were that cheap. Right. Yeah. They did. They sold them buy one, get one. And, they were really garbage. And so I have a friend of mine who does recovery work, and he said, I want them to bring that stuff in because there's going to be a lot of work in getting that junk off the road.
Yeah. Well, undoubtedly there would be. And I mean, fortunately, and look, the right way to do this and the place where we grow this electric vehicle revolution in the United States is you got to meet consumers where they are. People like SUVs, people like pickup trucks, build them, right? And let's do it well. Let's make cars that people are going to want to buy. And also find the price point and find the tax credits and all of that and the charging network to build that. The way not to do this, and I'm just, boy, this is going to sound really cynical, but it would be the easy answer just to say, yeah, let's let millions of Chinese sedans come in and replace other small gas-powered sedans in the United States. And it would be, in some respects, an easy solution, but it would be the wrong one because it would end the transition to EV vehicles for SUVs, for pickup trucks, and it wouldn't go beyond a certain market segment. You're never going to get there with that, and it would be an enormous mistake and a big market for these giant companies that would like nothing more than to dominate the global automobile landscape and hit that holy grail of it, which is the American market. Yeah. Because people buy here anywhere from 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 million cars a year, and so it is a massive market that they're eager to get into.
And look, this is where I go back to what we talked about at the beginning. You build and you manufacturing what you can, and you trade for what you can't. We make EVs here.
We do.
We have the ability to make EVs here. We have the ability to make solar panels, and look, solar panels and the next generation of energy products. We have the ability to make here. We don't have to buy from China. This could be a jobs boom that could grow the working class of this country back to prosperity, if we do it right. But, like you said, opening up the borders, allowing them to dump is going to destroy that opportunity again.
Yeah. And we know how the script ends too, because we've seen it in other industries and what happens. And Americans are not going to stomach a massive effort to combat climate change that's built on the back of lost jobs here. It's just not going to be something that is going to be politically supported. It'll have the opposite effect. And so let's get those manufacturing jobs. Let's make sure that we have the right tariffs in place against those Chinese products. And when President Biden is meeting with Xi Jinping, and when we have these other high-level meetings, we need to make very clear to them that we welcome collaboration wherever it's possible, but that we hold them accountable, and that there are no keys to the American market that we're just going to give away like we have in the past. And that there must be some accounting for the unfair trade practices, for the human rights abuses, and for the belligerence that we're starting to see with Chinese military maneuvers as well. No, and so I don't want a confrontation, but I think we have to lay the cards on the table. Otherwise, we never get that honest conversation.
Yeah, I don't want a confrontation either, and I don't want a confrontation that I paid for. Just kind of throwing that out there. Lastly, I got to get your thoughts. You wrote an op-ed over at the Sacramento Bee. Wanted to get your thoughts on on Governor Newsom meeting with Chinese officials. Thoughts?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I wrote it with Biden's visit, Biden's meeting in mind about, this. Well, what Newsom did was a roadmap of what not to do, which is you don't raise human rights, and that you do solely focus on climate change, which is an important issue, but we have other issues that we want to get on the table as well. and that you don't screw up things like we've done in the past. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger wanted to make nice with China, and so built the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge with Chinese steel, destroyed thousands of job opportunities on the West Coast, and they got a crappy bridge. So that ought to be a lesson for President Biden and everybody else as we move forward, is that you literally get what you pay for here, which is not a good deal for workers or for the economy or for our security.
Scott, as always, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Of course, Rick. Great to be with you as always.
Our good friend Scott Paul. Make sure you check out their website, AmericanManufacturing.org. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1938. That was the day that the National Federation of Telephone Workers was founded in New Orleans, Louisiana. Today, the union is known as the Communication Workers of America and represents 700,000 workers in a wide range of communication fields. Attempts to organize the telephone industry began as early as 1910 by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. By the end of the decade, the IBEW had more than 200 telephone unions. Growth in the number of union members in the telephone industry was greatly impeded due to World War I. During the war, President Woodrow Wilson issued an order to, quote, hereby take possession and assume control and supervision of each and every telegraph and telephone system, and every part thereof within the jurisdiction of the United States. He placed control of the industry under the authority of the Postmaster General. After the war ended, telephone companies increasingly installed company unions as a way to control their workers' organizing efforts. Their aim was to stave off unionism from outside organizations. Nearly all of the IBEW locals lost their membership to company unions. But when Congress passed the Wagner Act in 1935, a new surge of independent unionism began in the telephone industry. In 1938, 31 organizations joined together in New Orleans to form the National Federation of Telephone Workers. It was a loose association of locally independent unions. But by 1947, it became clear that the union would have to form a strong national presence to negotiate with the nationwide companies. And the Communication Workers of America was born. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
You know, today you heard the big fight, the big almost fight. You know, Mark Wayne Mullen going to go after Sean O'Brien, but you also didn't hear about Sean Fain, who testified before the committee hearing today, talking about the wages, the benefits, all of the things that the UAW was able to accomplish, and how, you know, transforming the auto industry back into one of prosperous jobs is a focus. Didn't hear that. No. But there was a little Reuters story about Hyundai. Evidently, Hyundai has said that they're going to boost wages of their hourly workers by 25% by 2028. Because guess what? they get it. They get the fact that their workers are paid much less than the UAW members, and could be an attractive target. This is what I've talked about numerous times over the years. When we had a union density rate of 35%, 35% of the workers in this country were making good wages, family sustaining wages with health care and retirement. And 35% of the workers who weren't in unions were getting just about the same thing, which meant you had a broadly prosperous working class. Now we're down to 6% in the private sector. And what do you how do you think that goes across the economy? I think, as Sean O'Brien's testimony pointed out, CEO pay up over 1,200% over the last couple of decades. Worker pay 15%. Gee, I wonder who has a contract and who doesn't. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on line 1. Alice, how are you today?
Semi-coherent.
That's better than insane. All right, we're on the right path.
Okay.
What's going on?
Well, the reason why I wanted to call was to remind everybody that come December 1st, you're not going to be on here. You're going to be on TV, and to ask you to tell us what time the show will be on, because you said it's changing to going to be a 1-hour program.
Currently, we're on at 9 p.m., much like we are in our terrestrial view. In the new year, there's talk of moving us to 7 in the morning and then a repeat at sometime at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They are still putting that together, and that's the reason I haven't given out the definitives yet, because don't really have it all in place. But that's what's being discussed right now. That's where we are.
Okay. All right then. So I thought I would ask, so I would know, and so would everyone else.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Have a good evening, Rick.
Thanks, Alice. No, look, at the end of it, we are ticking down to the end of our time on live terrestrial radio. As I've said, we're going to be offering the audio from the TV show to all of our affiliates. Many of them are going to pick it up, so you'll get the hour of audio for terrestrial radio, which we're happy about. And look, I like the interactivity, and we're talking about some new possibilities and some new things of having this kind of interaction on a certain level. But again, there's so many exciting opportunities that everyone's everything's hitting on all cylinders right now, and we're looking forward to the new year and the new format, and the jump to being a focus on television. And I've said it before, radio has been my passion for all these years. It's just that there's nowhere to grow where we are. There's no more growth in this side of things, and it goes back to I look at our time at the Teddy Roosevelt inaugural site, and the fact that the moneyed interest controlled virtually everything in that era, kind of like you have today. It's hard to go against the corporate narrative. It's hard to go against what the moneyed interests want. And this is where the free speech folks have given us basically complete editorial, have given us complete editorial control over whatever we want to do. There's no input from them whatsoever on what we focus on or what we talk about, and I would never agree to that. They're giving us the opportunity to really use the brand and to expand our reach in ways that we've been wanting to do for a while. And that, unfortunately, as much as I love radio, we just don't have the ability. We're in 50 markets across the country, and that's being politically where we are is incredible. It puts us in the top 2 or 3 programs in the country. But going to TV is going to put us in every home in the country. Free speech is everywhere. We're in the hotel, and I flipped on the TV, and it was actually on. And it's one of those things where you see this and you go, yeah, we're making the right choice. This is where we need to be. And the talk is to expand into some other ideas as well. I've thrown out the idea of a live Saturday, call-in kind of thing, which, unheard of on TV. So we've thrown out a bunch of ideas, and there's going to be some really good opportunities coming out of this. So thank you, Alice. I appreciate it. But more importantly, check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. We will be posting all of that stuff as it comes up. So even after December 1st, when we turn off the live mics, there will be information. Subscribe to the podcast, always going to be there. And we're going to do some additional, specifically content related stuff for podcasts. So we're looking forward to the new year, and I hope you'll come with us. But thericksmithshow.com, that's where you'll find information as it pops up. But again, thank you, Alice. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Tuvalu is extremely vulnerable to the impact of climate change.
Australia signs historic climate refuge treaty with Pacific Island nation Tuvalu. New analysis finds the last 12 months were the hottest in recorded human history. Some big policy changes after the 2023 elections. Plus,
I will not be running for re-election.
Manchin to exit the Senate.
Exit stage right. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
On day one, I'm taking all the Biden regulations, the Green New Deal, ripping it up and throwing it in the trash can where it belongs.
Well, there's some good news from Ron DeSantis. Who knew Joe Biden passed the Green New Deal? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, let's start, I think, with the least surprising news we will have all day on the Green News Report.
Yes, it's true. We have all just lived through the hottest 12-month period in recorded human history and likely the hottest in 125,000 years. That's according to a new analysis from nonprofit data firm Climate Central, which also found that 2023's historic extreme heat waves were made at least 3 times more likely by humanity's fossil fuel emissions that have warmed the planet dramatically. Plus, average temperatures over the past year have met or exceeded the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming threshold above pre-industrial levels that scientists warn could irreversibly damage, if not destroy, entire ecosystems.
Now, last time that came up, you said, oh, don't worry about it. It's only temporarily above 1.5. But are we quite sure it's only temporary?
Well, that's what the scientists say. And on top of that, a major new United Nations report finds that the top 20 oil-producing countries have plans on the books to increase output of oil, gas, and coal through 2030, despite warnings from the United Nations and the world scientists that fossil fuels must be urgently phased out. The UN Production Gap Report calculates that the collective emissions from projects planned around the world will blow past Paris Climate Agreement climate targets, quote, throwing humanity's future into question. The UN says the report shows that despite the rapid growth of renewable energy around the world and governments' pledges to cut emissions, most have yet to begin grappling with how they will begin to reduce demand for and production of fossil fuels that are the primary cause of the climate crisis.
Because you thought the fossil fuel industry was just going to, leave all that in the ground?
In politics, at the third Republican primary debate held last week in Miami, a coastal city already struggling against rising sea levels, the words climate change were never spoken by candidates or the NBC moderators. They also ignored the surge in U.S.-based manufacturing for electric vehicles and wind and solar energy incentivized by President Biden's climate law, the Inflation Reduction Act. The Republican candidates pledged to repeal clean air and water rules and expand fossil fuel production, and they misled the public about the fact that the United States today is producing and exporting more oil than during the Trump administration.
Oh, you mean they lied to the American public about Joe Biden's accomplishment? Knock me over with an oil-soaked feather.
Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of the coal state of West Virginia announced he will not seek re-election in 2024, putting Democrats at high risk of losing their razor-thin Senate majority that enabled passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act.
And, of course, the Green New Deal.
Which did not pass.
Oh. Then why does Ron DeSantis want to tear it up?
West Virginia's current governor, Jim Justice, is favored to win the Republican nomination. Justice is a billionaire coal baron whose companies have racked up massive unpaid mine safety and pollution violations. In the 2023 election, voters in Texas approved $10 billion in new subsidies to expand electric grid capacity.
Nice.
But most of that will go to build new natural gas power plants.
Oh.
In Maine, voters rejected a proposal to replace their private investor-owned electric utilities with a publicly owned nonprofit, setting back efforts to push the utilities to transition to cleaner energy sources. Finally, Australia late last week signed a landmark climate climate and security treaty with the low-lying Pacific island nation of Tuvalu, offering a lifeline that will allow Tuvalu residents facing displacement from rising seas the right to resettle in Australia, a refuge as their Pacific homeland is lost beneath the seas. It's the first time Australia has offered residence or citizenship rights due to the threat posed by climate change. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announced the agreement last week.
I believe that developed nations have a responsibility to provide assistance, and that is precisely what we are doing.
People of Tuvalu may end up being among the first to retreat due to climate change. I fear they will not be the last.
Nope.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as we've been talking about the last several weeks, lots of strike activity, lots of people taking to the streets. And as I said at the beginning, look, Sean O'Brien in his testimony talked about, didn't say it the way I did, but I said, look, you got to support striking workers. You got to get out there and literally support them, walk with them. And look, this is where my Adopt a Striker program, this would be so perfect for the moment. Because on Thursday, November 16th, it's possible, if you're in the Dallas area, that you could adopt a striker. In fact, not just Dallas, in many places across the country, here locally near Philadelphia, Boston, Charlotte, Washington, a bunch of places where American Airlines flies out of, you can adopt a striker because there's the potential of an informational picket happening all across the country. And here to share some thoughts on why this could be happening and, well, what we hope happens to avert it. I guess that's an airline term, isn't it? I've asked Paul Hartshorn to come talk with us. Paul is the National Communications Chair for the Association of Professional Flight Attendants. Their website, apfa.org. Paul, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for making time for me. Pleasure to be here.
So walk me through why are we here? What's going on? What's the demand? Why are we in this moment?
Yeah, the saga continues, right? The flight attendants of American Airlines have been in negotiations for 5 years now.
Hold on. 5 years?
5 years. 5 years. We're coming up on the 5th year anniversary that the contract became amendable between American Airlines and their flight attendant union.
So you haven't had a raise in 5 years?
We haven't had a raise since January of 2019. And these are wages that were negotiated in 2014. This is a company that is sending its new hires to Miami, New York City, Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles, and expecting them to live on the 2014 wages.
How?
It's not easy. It's not pretty. We, as I said, been in negotiations for 5 years. We filed for federal mediation. Obviously, we're governed under the Railway Labor Act because we're a transportation union. Filed for mediation 6 months ago. This week, we are in negotiations with the company, with American Airlines. It's being held in Phoenix, Arizona, at the direction of the National Mediation Board. And if the company, if American, does not make meaningful progress and moves towards adequate pay raises, towards improvements in our sick and vacation time, the ability for our flight attendants to retire with a little bit of dignity with a 401k, then we are going to be petitioning the National Mediation Board this week, early next week, to release us into a 30-day cooling off period.
Which inevitably down the road could lead to a strike, with which you just had a strike authorization vote of 99.47%. So literally one guy voted against the idea of a strike, but every other of your 20-some thousand members, they're like, hey, I can't live in Los Angeles on poverty wages. It's time to fight for something. That impressive.
Yeah, one guy hit the wrong button, It was actually unbelievable. It was unprecedented, 99.5%. We had a 93% participation rate, something we've never hit before. The flight attendants are unified. They're committed. They are ready to put their livelihoods on the line. They tell us every day, from the most senior to the most junior at our company, they're ready to put their livelihoods on the line to secure the contract that we've earned, and most certainly the contract that these 26,000 flight attendants deserve.
Now, I go back to, something that in Sean O'Brien's testimony, CEO pay, from 78 to 22 has gone up over 1,200%. But the average worker has only seen about a 15% wage increase over that same period of time. The American Airlines CEO, he's not poor, is he?
Certainly looks to me like he's making a good living. I will say, aside from his base salary, a lot of it is, operational incentive, stock performance, things of that nature. But I think he puts his head on the pillow and rests peacefully at night for sure.
No, because this is one of those things that, again, if you would have read O'Brien's testimony instead of being focused on the bread and circus of the day of whatever clown buffoonery was going on, you would have seen that he talked about in his testimony the fact that we give these corporations the ability to write off massive CEO compensation as long as it's tied to, a performance-based pay stuff, which is basically pumping and dumping stocks. This is something that, again, I'm so frustrated and angry over, but you've got a CEO at American who's like you said, he's putting his head on the pillow fairly comfortable at night, while his workers are struggling in major cities across this country to produce the wealth that his company has that he gets to benefit from.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just about the base compensation, of which we haven't had a raise in 5 years. It's other things. It's retirement. It's the way that our productivity has increased. Look, American Airlines took the opportunity during COVID to remove flight attendants from wide body equipment, all under the guise of, understandably, the flights were empty, right? The revenue wasn't coming in, with the understanding that those flight attendants would return. So that never happened. I know you're shocked, but that never happened. So these flights are flying at 100% capacity to Europe, South America, Asia now, sometimes transcontinental. And these flight attendants are being paid the same, and they're being much more productive. Obviously, from a crew standpoint and a passenger standpoint, we all suffer, but that's something the company's now not willing to give back.
Yeah.
So we're talking about base pay here. We're talking about retirement, understaffing, the ability to have a livable duty day, shorten our duty days so we're not on duty for 15, 16 hours a day. This is all basic stuff. A lot of this stuff are things that we gave up after the bankruptcies and the concessionary era that followed the tragedies of 9/11. Look, we gave up so much in base pay, so much in work rules. And what we're fighting to get back today in this contract that we are talking about doesn't even match what we, and I'll say we, me, because I was here, had in our contract in 1998. We're fighting for our sick time that matches what we had in 98. We're fighting for vacation pay of what we had in 2000 before the tragedies of 9/11 that just gutted the industry. So there's a lot at stake here. They're not willing to give this back. And I'm here to tell you and to tell everyone that we are not going to settle for a contract that doesn't pay us appropriately, that doesn't adjust for inflation and also a pay raise. This is our time. Look, this is a fight that you've seen. This is the working class fight, right? We saw it across industries. We saw it across unions. You're about to see it across airlines. We're not the only one. It's not just the flight attendants. It's the ground workers. It's the pilots. We are all going to come and really at today get what we have earned. And it's time.
No, absolutely. And as you were talking, I'm thinking of the same conversations I had with strikers in Michigan and in Toledo, Ohio, on the UAW picket lines, saying, look, we sacrificed, we tightened the belt during the tough times. We helped these companies to survive, and now they're thriving, and they don't want to share. And, as you were talking about, removing some of the flight attendants from the wide body planes, my mind goes to the old line of, no good deed goes unpunished. In this time of crisis, you're going to throw in, you're going to do a little extra work. You're going to work harder to make sure that, no one gets left behind, that kind of a theory. And then the companies go, well, look what you did, and look what we can now expect from you going forward. This is the thing that I think a lot of people are really upset about, especially coming out of the pandemic after they were called essential and heroes and patriotic and all of that other nonsense. Do you get that same sense?
Yeah, I get that same sense. I mean, the working class Americans are fed up. They're disgusted. They're tired of being neglected. And I will say, for your listeners who may not know, we are governed under the Railway Labor Act. So we're not like a teachers union or the auto workers that can say when our contracts expire, we're walking off the job tomorrow. It is markedly different. The Railway Labor Act has its flaws, and that's probably for another conversation. But we do have to be released into a 30-day cooling off period before we can strike. So we've been very strategic. We've been very strategic with American, narrowing the issues, moving where we can to try to get to something that we can all work with. The idea the National Mediation Board says is that if we do release you, these issues should be able to be rectified within that 30-day cooling off period. The union has more than done its job coming together, moving things around to make it more palatable for the National Mediation Board to narrow the issues. But what we won't do is we won't narrow the issues on our compensation, our retirement, the scheduling flexibility that has been lost as a result of the COVID pandemic, as a result of flying that has changed, duty days that have increased, 4 or 5 flights a day instead of 2, 3 flights a day. All of this needs to be addressed. American Airlines knows they need to address it. They have ways to address it. There are even ways to address it that would benefit their crew scheduling department. They need to come to the table and they need to get this done. And this is the week that they need to do it because the union has set a deadline.
No, good for you. And look, you said you're strategic. I would argue patient as well. 5 years without a contract. It's just crazy to me. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Paul Hartshorn. Paul is the National Communications Chair for the Association of Professional Flight Attendants. Their website, apfa.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. Now, like you said, you've got to go this whole process of before you can go through on a strike. And as I pointed out, 99.47% of the members have said that they're ready to go on strike. The question is, will you be allowed to go on strike? I mean, as you pointed out, it's a long journey to get there. Air traffic is a big deal in this country. Do you think you'd be allowed to do it?
Like I said before, I think there's a strategy in how you do it. I think that you heard talk on Capitol Hill today about the inefficiencies within the Railway Labor Act, how you haven't seen transportation unions allowed to be released into a 30-day cooling off period like you did in the 90s. You saw a lot more. And I think that when you saw that happen, you saw companies and unions move and you had deals completed.
Right.
The way that it's doing now, that where we aren't releasing, and it's definitely a hit or miss. If it's going to happen, needs to be addressed. It needs to be a process, and it needs to be respected. The Railway Labor Act was obviously not instituted to keep labor unions or labor groups from striking. That was never the intention. It was actually to be strategic about it and to plan ahead for it. And that's what we need to see. I think that we have a friend in Joe Biden and his administration. I think that we have been in touch with the White House. Our national president, Julie Hedrick, works closely with the Transport Workers Union, who represents Southwest. She works very closely with Sarah Nelson, representing the 20 airlines at AFA. And I think we're all on the same page that we need to have this way to bring this to a close. And I think we're going to have a friend in the Biden administration, and they're going to need to move this forward. So we're willing. We've been strategic, and we're going to work forward to this. And we're definitely after this week, if we don't see meaningful movement, we're going to move the process forward.
Outstanding. On November 16th?
November 16th, you're going to 13 crew bases and American Airlines focus cities across the country. apfa.org/picketing. Please join us. Please come out and see us. We'd love to have everyone there, unions, passengers, media, you name it.
There you go. Your opportunity to adopt a striker, get out there and walk on the picket line and get a great sign while you're there as well. Paul, I appreciate you taking some time for us. The best of luck, buddy. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again.
For sure. Keep in touch. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Paul Hartshorn, National Communications Chair with the flight. This again, amazing to me that we're in this moment and the CEO class still thinks it's pre-pandemic stuff. 5 years without a contract, amazing. But remember, on the 16th, find a striker, adopt a striker. That's the call. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So have I got the job for you? This is an amazing opportunity for the right candidate for the job of a lifetime. You could win this job. You could be the person who gets to ride the wiener. That's it. You could ride the wiener. You could ride the wiener mobile. I'm sorry. You could be a hot dogger. That's right. You could. I've seen them driving around, and I'm going, how do you get that gig? Well, I now know, and I think I'm going to apply. I think I'm going to try and be a hot dogger and ride the wiener mobile. I know there's some. Don't send me any memes. But Oscar Mayer, they are a craft company. They are seeking a Wienermobile driver. They are seeking someone to drive the wiener. and I guess you got to be a spokesperson too. The compensation, you ask, how much do you get paid? Well, compensation will be offered. It'll take into account internal equity. I don't know what that means. And also may vary depending on the candidate's geographic region, job-related knowledge, skills, and experience, among other factors. Don't really know what that means, but I'm sure they'll make up something. It's a 1-year assignment, paid, so you can be a hot dogger. Understand, the first iconic Wienermobile, 1936. They have created in 1988 this program designed to hire and develop top talent, grow future leaders of the company, and create game changers, innovators, and cultural champions. The team of hot doggers in Wienermobile offer the Oscar Mayer brand an unparalleled competitive advantage, delivering incremental sales, merchandising, distribution, and creating a personal experience with thousands of consumers each year. That's right, you can go out on the road because the Hot Dogger program right now is seeking an individual, could be you, ready to deliver creative solutions on Kraft Heinz' journey to become the indispensable food company in North America. I already thought they were. Anyway, the Hot Dogger Tour, the Oscar Mayer Hot Dogger program, is a 1-year assignment starting and ending the first week of June. 12-month program. includes being the face of a multi-billion-dollar brand while acting as our trusted boots on the ground, 2 weeks of immersive onboarding and relevant job training, ongoing coaching and mentoring through staff meetings and in-field meetings, post-tour opportunities and connections with Kraft Heinz, and hundreds of successful alumni. You too can be a wiener. In the Wiener Club, evidently. Regular meetings and coaching from top public relations and social media people, regional and partnership assignments that provide professional growth, chance to see the country. You can drive a giant wiener all across the country. What do you need to, you ask, how do I get this wonderful opportunity? What is it in me that they are seeking? Well, they want people who are experienced in working with the public and consumers, and I am. I'm Mr. Consumer Service. I'm Mr. Customer Service. You need to have prior travel experience. I've got that. You need to be highly autonomous, require organizational and time management skills. Oh, damn. Understanding a popular social media channels. I kind of get that. Ability to work independently and within a team. Not so good with the team. I can do it. I'm okay by myself. Positive and outgoing, a people person. Damn. All right. Well, I guess I'm out. Now, they do describe the life as a hot dogger. While no 2 days are the same in the hot dogger program, a tour includes representing the Oscar Mayer brand. Every day you crisscross the hot dog highways of America, executing and reporting over 200 events during 1 year, pitching and appearing on local television. Yeah, you want to be seen standing next to a giant wiener. Uh-huh. You know what? That's the thing. If they were dumb enough to give me the job, I would have to live with the reality that I'm going to be standing next to a giant 28-foot wiener for the rest of my life, because none of my friends are going to let me live that down. Never, ever, ever. You'll have to create social media content for their social platforms, maintain and drive the 87-year-old icon and piece of American pop culture. You mean I got to change the oil? I got to fix the damn thing too? It's bad enough I got to ride on it. I got to fix it too? Okay. Coordinating with all aspects of Wienermobile travel logistics, so I got to plan my own trip. Okay, great. And I guess then there's a ton more, and I only got a couple minutes to wrap this up. And while it's been fun, here's the kicker. Sounds like a job, right? Sounds like something where you go, hey, this has got to pay pretty well, right? Well, evidently, 35 grand a year. You're making a little over $15, almost $16 an hour. And here's the kicker. You need a bachelor's degree to get the job to drive a wiener. How ridiculous. You're going to drive the wiener. It's like, being the guy who has to dress up in the costume and stand out on the street corner and spin a sign going, hey, for 35 grand a year, you need a bachelor's degree. How stupid is this? But I love the way that they put it. If you relish the chance to hitch a ride in the wiener. But, while this is all fun, it's kind of hysterical. They want you on the road for an entire year. They want an entire year of your life to go out and pitch their brand, be a spokesperson to all these media outlets, take damn pictures of the thing with yourself at it and others. And 35 grand is what they're willing to spend for that. We're talking a multi-billion-dollar industry. And, it's quite remarkable. And look, there will be people who do it. And look, if I was a young kid who was just looking to drive around and make myself look ridiculous, this is probably what I would go, hey, yeah, I can crash a wiener. I can run a wiener into things just as well as anybody. Yeah. Now, I do also like their values. Let's finish on the values. Hot doggers are expected to embody the values. Consumer obsessed, do better every day, champion great people, diversity, do the right thing. Yeah, you gotta have a bachelor's degree in public relations or journalism to drive a freaking wiener.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1938. That was the day that the National Federation of Telephone Workers was founded in New Orleans, Louisiana. Today, the union is known as the Communication Workers of America and represents 700,000 workers in a wide range of communication fields. Attempts to organize the telephone industry began as early as 1910 by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. By the end of the decade, the IBEW had more than 200 telephone unions. Growth in the number of union members in the telephone industry was greatly impeded due to World War I. During the war, President Woodrow Wilson issued an order to, quote, hereby take possession and assume control and supervision of each and every telegraph and telephone system, and every part thereof within the jurisdiction of the United States. He placed control of the industry under the authority of the Postmaster General. After the war ended, telephone companies increasingly installed company unions as a way to control their workers' organizing efforts. Their aim was to stave off unionism from outside organizations. Nearly all of the IBEW locals lost their membership to company unions. But when Congress passed the Wagner Act in 1935, a new surge of independent unionism began in the telephone industry. In 1938, 31 organizations joined together in New Orleans to form the National Federation of Telephone Workers. It was a loose association of locally independent unions. But by 1947, it became clear that the union would have to form a strong national presence to negotiate with the nationwide companies. And the Communication Workers of America was born.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
The far-out right wing's latest political ploy takes extremism to the extreme, escalating their divisive series of culture wars, banning books, suppressing women's rights, whitewashing history, demonizing teachers, etc. Their current idea is to declare war on ideas. Specifically, they're going after state university programs that teach creative arts and social studies, including history, languages, music, civics, literature, economics, theology, and other courses in the humanities that explore ideas, foster free thinking, and expand enlightenment. They say we can't have that. Thus, GOP lawmakers in North Carolina, for example, are eliminating funding for top humanities professors in their universities, shifting those funds to programs in high-tech and engineering that are favored by the corporate hierarchy. Likewise, public universities in Alaska, Florida, Iowa, Kansas, Ohio, and elsewhere are being made to cancel their humanities programs and puff up their departments of business, finance, and marketing. The right-wing shriveled view is that a university education is not about expanding one's horizon and enriching America's democratic society, but solely about training students to fit into a corporate workforce. As a Mississippi Republican official explained, under this minimalized and monetized concept of higher education, state spending on college degree programs will require that they match the needs of the economy. What? Is America nothing but its economy? Is the value of students measured only by the size of their future paychecks? Is public spending only worthy if it serves corporate interests? This is Jim Hightower saying, ironically, the politicos trying to cancel teaching of the humanities are proving that such courses are essential. After all, the humanities strive to humanize today's social order of corporate domination, exploitation, and inequality. The value of that vastly exceeds its price.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I do stand corrected on the salary for the wiener job, because you too could drive the wiener. The base salary is $35,000 a year, but hey, you get a food allowance and an expense allowance of $150 a week. And I'm looking at that. I'm going, wait a second. I don't know that $150 a week is enough. Not just food, but personal travel as well. Any of your personal expenses, $150 a week doesn't seem like a lot to eat on, even a single person, unless they're giving you all the wieners you can eat. And then, well, do they pay for the cholesterol medicine? I do not know. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick. How are you?
I am good. I'm thinking about a career change. I'm thinking about driving the Wienermobile.
Well, let's. I'm going to put a caption to that. When you finish that, we've got Speaker Johnson, Speaker Smith. Yeah, Paul Ryan, who became Speaker of the House and was a candidate, as you remember, with Mitt Romney for VP.
Yeah.
All right. When he was a teenager, he worked for Oscar Mayer, and he drove the Wienermobile.
Wow.
Yes, he drove it, and he became Speaker of the House. So there is a future for you.
So maybe they should be advertising this. Hey, you want to be? Well, no, I don't think Speaker is that attractive of a job anymore. I think driving the Wienermobile would be more fun.
Well, driving the Wienermobile these days, you'll have more longevity than being Speaker of the House. So, but that is a true story. They made fun of him a lot, but he drove the Wienermobile when he was a teenager.
Well, yes, everyone wants to have a 27-foot wiener. So there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Good. Good for him. But here's the thing. You think back to that. You're a 16-year-old driving that thing around. That was kind of when you're a kid, you do dumb things like that. You wear the funny paper hat to work at the McDonald's. You do that because
sure.
That's the next thing. They want a college graduate. They want people with lots of qualifications. I'm going. Back then, no self-respecting adult with a college degree would do this kind of job. Now this is what they've expected from us.
You think Marjorie Taylor Greene named she could ride the Wienermobile?
I hope we'd run her over.
I mean, I just wonder, would she be good at it? Do you think? Huh? What do you think? Huh?
I'm not going there.
Question here.
I'm not
Marjorie
going
Taylor Greene could she drive that thing?
Yeah,
huh?
I'm sure she would. I'm sure she would.
Okay.
All right. So now that I'm right to the FCC line, I think.
Yeah, Congresswoman Boebert, she could be. I think she's proven herself to be a good driver.
I'm sure she could, but according to her tweets, she does her best work on her knees. So.
Okay.
Let's leave that word. I don't know what that means, but we're going to leave that where it is. Let's talk about Mike Johnson.
Speaking of another wiener, go ahead. Yes. Focus.
It's late. Maybe not late enough. But let's talk about Johnson since he might not be around much longer. We actually got a deal. There's going to be no shutdown.
Yeah, I mean, the wiener thing goes on. Speaking of wieners, Matt Gaetz, we've got to see what he thinks, of the whole thing.
I think we're beating the wiener.
It's been avoided, and it was a bipartisan vote. So the House has passed it. The final vote was now. This was 336 to 95.
Right.
All right. So if Gaetz now tries to take him out over this, it will be. I don't think they will. Well, I know they won't now. It would be the next time.
Right.
It would be the next time. It extends it till January the 19th because he technically did in a longer version of what McCarthy did.
No, he had to. I mean, there was no exit for him.
Of course.
Democrats were not going to cave in this moment, which, good on them for finally finding a set to go. Never mind. Finding a set and standing up to this. And it's and look, I was never going to stand for them, doing this laddered, shutdown where they're going to go after food stamp programs. They're going to go after programs that help people first to cause pressure points and pain. So this is a good development for me. I think this is the right thing.
Well, right. He went ahead. It was. Let's see. He had 190 Republicans. I'm doing the numbers here. He had 127 Republicans. So 90 Republicans. 90 voted against it. Now, some people had told me, they said, well, the Democrats will let it tank so he's thrown out. I said, no. Actually, the Democrats voting for it is a public policy piece itself. But politically, the Democrats voting for it will allow Matt Gaetz to say, you see what the traitor did.
Yeah.
But he had a lot of Republicans against this. I think more Republicans were against it than would normally have been because of the fact that, they knew the Democrats were going to step in to make sure the government didn't shut down. There was nothing wrong with what the Democrats did at all for public policy.
No.
Nothing.
No.
It's not. They didn't give away anything. They didn't, let Johnson change the world. So it's okay what they did. Now, the bill doesn't include any supplemental for Israel and Ukraine, and the Senate has, despite not full Democratic support, the Senate has taken the standalone Israel bill and added the Ukraine to it. So then it goes back, and then there'll be some type of conference committee over it.
And let the fighting begin. And
or
speaking of fighting, I'm sure you saw the news was just all awash over Markwayne Mullen. Stand your butt up. Going after Sean O'Brien of the Teamsters, and also you had the former speaker. Evidently, Kevin McCarthy elbowed this representative Tim Burchett, which Tim's saying he's still sore. It was a good shot to the kidneys. He might not be able to come to work tomorrow.
Yeah, I know. Depending on where that happened, because I was looking, for example, at the tape. I don't know if you saw Justin Trudeau elbowing the female member of Parliament. I don't know if you saw that or not. He elbowed her. I watched the tape 5 times, but he didn't know he was elbowing her. He was angry. They were holding up a member, and he went over and elbowed his way through, and hit her. So I don't know where McCarthy was to have done this. If it's in the Capitol, I assume there's a tape of it,
Yeah. Evidently, from what I understand, he was doing an interview, and supposedly McCarthy came up and elbowed him in the back. And now, was it a vicious elbow? I mean, the way you hear it spun is, it was a vicious attack from the behind. He caught me off guard, it's one of those things where you go, he could have been, he was just trying to get through. And like you said, was elbowing his way through and didn't mean to, put any real oomph behind it. And this guy's just overreacting and you got McCarthy saying, well, I didn't elbow anybody. If I hit somebody, they'd know I hit them. And you go, get out of here. This is just ridiculous. It's more bread and circus.
I did Tennessee radio today. All right. So my comment for Tennessee radio is, okay, the congressman's from Tennessee. He's not from, Rodeo Drive. And so I think he would be criticized more by his constituents for not turning around and grabbing McCarthy by the coat.
Yeah.
And saying, hey. So I think he'll be called a wimp, frankly, in Tennessee. This might go a different direction for you.
No, it should. Since it is, it's Vigilante Justice Day. We're going back to, Aaron Burr's name was brought up today. So, maybe we go back to dueling.
Right. Now the other one, which I thought was interesting, was when Bernie Sanders basically had to stop the potential fist fight. I think it would have been interesting to see who would have won that.
I think Mullen would have won.
Well, I'm just
Mullen's
saying.
A professional fighter.
What's that?
Mullen's a professional fighter. There's a guy who
trains
I guess
for
that.
That's true. He's from Oklahoma, and he was. But yeah, he challenged Sean O'Brien, but I don't know. That's kind of something else, you know.
Yeah. Well, for me, that was performative. That was to change the narrative of what came out of it. Because did you hear anybody report anything other than that came out of that hearing?
Nothing.
No. And we do this all the time. We here's the daily outrage. Here's the bread and circus. Here's the clown show, and we never talk about the substantive issues that they brought up. That my friend Sarah Nelson and Sean Fain and Sean O'Brien brought up in that hearing, which is how do we ensure that workers get a fair shake? How do we get good opportunities at better wages, hours, conditions, all of that stuff? How do we hold corporations accountable? How do we stop the growing monopolization of industry after industry? But we didn't hear any of that. We heard, stand your butt up. That's what we got from our mainstream media.
Theatrics.
That's it.
Done on purpose. He knew what would happen.
Yep. And someone, I said that to someone earlier, and they said, "Well, you give him too much credit." I go, "No, it's not a matter of credit. They train these people to understand how to think and how to play the news cycle. You don't get to be a senator if you don't know how to play the game."
Mm-hmm. Right, that's true. Well, I remember it was. I'm trying to remember the Democrat congressman from New York. Can't remember which one, and it was either Boebert or Green, and They were outside with the media, and one of them started with the other, and then they got into this, I'm going to whoop you thing or whatever they did. And I can't even remember now what the press conference was about, because the two of them, Democrat and Republican, went at each other,
Oh, yeah. Who was
saying
that?
things. And, of course, the media put that on for the evening, and the press conference was wiped out, So, yeah, a lot of theatrics. And somebody said to me, well, maybe you're just getting old and you're looking back on these things different. No, I'm not. Now, I remember when one member threatened another member to break his finger or something, and, I can remember that. But in general, we had 80% less of this stuff years back. 80% less of this. This has become a theatrics event.
Why is that? Is it because just our media culture with social media that you didn't have back then, that everyone needed to be on, performing to get attention? Is it because people, respected the institution more, leadership had more control? Any thoughts on why?
I think it's a couple of things, because some of this is internal Republican to Republican too. First of all, they're getting more media attention by these things happening. Like I said, things used to happen, when I was there, but the attention paid to it wasn't the same. You know what I mean? Yeah,
if a senator would have said, "Stand your butt up," you're arguing it wouldn't have gotten as much attention.
Right. Things happen in today's world. That's it. The media, the national media goes crazy with it. I think number two, the civility's gone. I've said before to people that when I got in trouble, I had phone calls from Democrats saying, "How's your kids doing? How's everything going?" And that type of thing occurred out there in D.C. And people, if some member had a member of their family pass away, people went to the funeral, opposite parties. So there was, even though it was the Gingrich-Clinton days, all right, where everybody thought that was bombastic, well, look at today. It was like Clinton and Gingrich were, smoking a cigarette together. Compared to what goes on today. So I think the civility absolutely changed. The political entertainment is getting more media than substance, because who really cares about $32 trillion in deficit? You don't even hear that mentioned.
Yeah.
But you'll hear these things mentioned. So, yeah, I think the media has fostered it. I think some members have gotten on, like the Boeberts of the world and Marjorie Taylor Three Names have gotten on to the fact that they can get a lot of attention by doing something goofy. And that brings me to my third point. Maybe there's more goofy people elected today. I don't know than back then. Maybe.
No, I think you had some goofballs back then, but just not as many.
Yeah.
I think there are more goofballs now.
Maybe there's a little bit more now.
And I would argue gerrymandering has a lot to do with that. because you have really safe districts where you can be the crazy guy who gets the most attention, gets the most attention and the most votes. At least that's my thought on it.
Yeah.
Finally, got to get your thought on, since it's Ohio, but there's a Republican panel in Ohio that approved House Bill 272. It's a piece of legislation that would allow concealed carry into buildings with a courtroom. Evidently, it has been sent to the House floor. So basically, as I understand this piece of legislation, you can carry your concealed weapon into courthouses, just not into the courtroom. Is this a smart thing?
Yeah, I don't understand. What they're doing. Under the revised code now in Ohio, of course, it's a felony to convey a deadly weapon into a courthouse or a building with a courthouse, in fact. And even if you have the concealed carry permit, you can't bring your firearm into the courthouse. And I just don't understand what potentially would benefit anyone to change that. And then if you can take it into the courthouse but not into the courtroom, do you have to put it then in a lockbox, or you just carry it around in the courthouse as long as you're not walking into the courtroom?
Yeah, I mean, more good guys with guns, I guess, is the answer to that, Bob.
Well, here's the other thing too, Rick. I was not a gun control advocate, when I was in Congress, but the litmus tests were different. Now it's like, well, you don't have to take any training to carry a gun or to have a gun permit. You don't have to have any training. Well, wait a minute. That's just wrong. So today, I'm a pro gun control guy because I think you ought to, just like you drive a car, but I think you ought to have some type of training. Why not?
Yeah.
And those things are done away with. The litmus tests have changed, and it's absolutely amazing. I can't understand who, has to yield to these types of things. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's NRA money.
Gone overboard.
To me, it's NRA money. But, we were in Buffalo over the weekend, and, we went to the Teddy Roosevelt inaugural site there. And right after, we went and did a little grocery shopping before we went and did some tailgating at the Bills-Broncos game. And with the supermarket we went to was the Tops on Jefferson Street, where the massacre had happened. I guess it was a year or so ago, where 10 people were killed in the supermarket. And there's a big mural off on the building across the street. And I walked into that place, and I couldn't help but think about, after seeing that, I couldn't help but think about, some guy with an AR-15 walked into this place and shot people buying produce. And then where would you run? Because once you were in that supermarket, there were no other exits other than that front door. And that really, again, when you think about in those terms, I then become, someone who's a little more willing to say, you know what, not everyone needs a semi-automatic weapon.
Right. Well, permitless, like I said, permitless carry. No requirement for a safety course, at least.
It's crazy.
And when I say the litmus tests have changed, they have changed. It's like you can have no form of anything, or you're a gun grabber.
Yeah, slippery slope,
so
Bob. Slippery slope. Yeah, that's scary times. But Bob, I appreciate the time, and stay away from that Wienermobile.
Hey, how much does it pay?
$35,000 a year. That's it.
Oh yeah, I'm down. That's it. Yeah, I'm going to apply for that. Then I'll run for speaker.
Look at that. $150 a week in food and personal expenses. Can't go wrong. Yep. It's about $42,000 a year in money in your pocket. I'll send you the application.
Okay.
Because you are a people person. You would get that. But thanks so much, our good friend Bob Ney. And look, that's the only downfall. I'm not a people person. I wish I were. I wish I could be bright and cheery, and maybe not. Gonna take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. Working women from around the nation founded the National Women's Trade Union League in Boston. The organization's founders included female reformers, working-class women, as well as women from wealthy families. The purpose of the organization was to assist in the organization of women wage workers into trade unions and thereby to help them secure conditions necessary for healthful and efficient work and to obtain a just reward for such work. One of the inspirations for the Women's Trade Union League was the work of Settlement House organizer Jane Addams. The Women's Trade Union League recognized that women across economic classes were united by what they called the bonds of womanhood. Wealthy league members donated money to the cause. They often served as spokeswomen and arranged for legal representation for workers when necessary. When the league was founded, the trade union movement was male-dominated. The male trade unionists worried more women in the labor market would drive down men's wages. Often union leaders were unwilling to allow women into their ranks. The Women's Trade Union League was one of the primary organizers of female garment workers, particularly in New York City and Chicago. The League was a key supporter of the 1909 New York City Shirtwaist Workers' Strike, also known as the Uprising of 20,000. The League was also a vocal advocate for the women's suffrage movement. The Women's Trade Union League disbanded in 1950, and in 1974, the Coalition of Labor Union Women was founded in Chicago to continue the fight to ensure women have a voice in the labor movement. However, women workers still earn about 80 cents on the dollar compared with men. The work of the Women's Trade Union League remains unfinished. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com. Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. Email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Got an email from Terry. She says, got my engineering degree from GMI, just like Mary Burra did. She's the CEO of Ford. I spent my career watching the auto giants take benefits away from the union rank and file and their salaried people. My dad retired from GM with full benefits and a retirement package. I got none of that. No CEO deserves to make millions, including Mary. The CEOs in this country wouldn't have a job if not for the rest of us. And this has been my point for a very long time. It's the same thing I say about billionaires. There should be no billionaires. Sorry. Yeah, I want you to do well. I want people to be well off. I want them to be able to take care of their kids and their grandkids. But the kind of enormous wealth that we've allowed to accumulate in the hands of the few is troubling. Now, I go back to my time in Buffalo at the inaugural site, and the statement from Andrew Carnegie about, money in the hands of, the masses, the unwashed masses, the uneducated, those people, that's wasted. You need to put it in the hands of people who know what to do with it. And this is what we've gone back to. See, we went from that, having a handful of, really super wealthy people who had all the control of government and all the control of business and did whatever they wanted. And then we went to democratize things. We went through the New Deal. We went through the idea of, of worker power. We created a broad class of working people who are prosperous. And now we've swung back the other way to where you've got a handful of really rich people who know what to do with the money. Because we got that argument. We need to cut taxes, because the rich people know what to do with the money. And I agree, they do. They've always known what to do with the money, and that is make more money for themselves. Now, the other benefits that happen with working people don't happen naturally because, sorry, benevolent dictators don't like to share. They share enough just to keep you from rising up and putting their head on a platter. And I think we're in a moment right now where our billionaire class is kind of concerned. If you start seeing a lot of billionaires coming out saying, hey, we need labor unions, we need to change the law, not just the patriotic millionaires and a handful of fringe folks, but the Jamie Dimons of the world, the big CEO class, start saying, we need to throw them a bone. They're worried about their heads being on a platter. But I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
I do answer all emails personally. Yeah, it's amazing. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time. Maybe I'll get the job at the Wienermobile. Who knows?
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.